is Fissionary, a show exploring how nuclear powers your world. I'm Mary Carpenter.
And I'm Jordan Houghton. Let's jump in.
Hey, Jordan.
Hey, Mary. Hello, Fissionaries. Welcome back, everybody.
Yeah, welcome back. This was a fun episode, Jordan.
Very excited to talk to Charly Frisk from Time for Better today about climate action. I have worked with Charly over the past year on a couple of Time for Better's Hope House events and got to finally go to one for the first time at Climate Week this year. And I had so much fun. They had the most amazing space. We had this great view of New York. Sierra, who's one of the founders of Time for Better, had her dog there. And having a pet on site just made the whole thing that much better.
Yeah, I love what the work they're doing. And Charly will talk a bit about this in the episode, but they're creating events at places that are a little bit more exciting than a usual event, right? Like the Hope House has cocktails, and I know in New York, they had friendship bracelets and I think some painting activities, things that they're really drawing people in a very friendly and warm and welcoming way at events that might not have other places like that. And then they're fostering these important conversations on climate change and solutions for it, including nuclear energy. So it just feels like a very welcoming, warm approach to what can be kind of an intense topic like climate change in places that can be intense and very, government official.
I have to say, having been at Climate Week for the first time, the week is exhausting. There's so many things you can do, so many places you can see, and there's just a lot of information to take in. And something that we talk about with Charly is how people have climate anxiety as it is. So the temperature's already a little high because people are worried about this. And the folks who are showing up to actually engage in these events are there because they care and they want to make a difference. Hope House was like a wellness break in a way.
Yeah.
Like it was nice to be able to show up to something, and it wasn't necessarily showing up to a panel that I had to take all these notes to. I got to make some friendship bracelets, hang around while I was doing that, and talk to other people who are interested in climate and hear how they're impacting the space through their work. And it was just a really different, cool approach. And yes, snacks and cocktails always help.
Yeah, and I'm glad they're doing it because a lot of people aren't. Somebody needs to be there and create exciting events that especially younger people want to be involved in. And Charly talks about this, how we reach the youth and how we help them understand that nuclear is a great solution for climate change, and it helps with climate anxiety. So I think you guys are going to like this episode. Let's dive in. We're excited to welcome Charly Frisk to the podcast. As a director of climate action at Time for Better and a documentary filmmaker, Charly Frisk is a passionate climate advocate dedicated to driving meaningful environmental change. She leads innovative climate communication initiatives, manages social media campaigns, and coordinates impactful events like Climate Week NYC. Holding a Master's of Environmental Management from Yale and a dual degree in Environmental Studies and Peace Studies, Charly is committed to climate education and advocacy, particularly at the intersection of climate change and agriculture. Welcome, Charly. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me today.
So you're currently the director of climate action at Time for Better. Can you explain what the organization is and how you got started there?
Yes, I would love to. Time for Better is a creative climate communications agency that focuses on climate storytelling through the lens of hope and optimism. And I started working at Time for Better, which is founded by the lovely Sierra Quiddiquit, who's a pro skier. During my first year at grad school, I had seen that she was going to be hosting an event activation in New York City over Instagram. And I thought it would be a great opportunity to go volunteer and meet some people. So I started working with her about 3 years ago. And have been able to do some really creative and fun climate activation through those years and everything.
We'd love to hear more about those, actually. You've had the opportunity to travel quite a bit with Time for Better, having gone to events like COP, and you just mentioned Climate Week. Your team creates these events to have a space that fosters collaboration and promotes well-being around themes of hope, which you mentioned, and climate change. Why was it important that you create these spaces, and what's the response been?
Yes. So Time for Better focuses on digital communications and also these wonderful event activations that you just described. And we're best known for our Hope House, which gets put up alongside UN COPs and then Climate Weeks as well. And what we really tried to create is this hub for optimism and action. Often in the climate space, especially at these large scale climate movements, although it is changing, these events can be very stuffy. You know, you're walking into these global climate events, everybody is in a bad mood, everybody's dehydrated, everybody's hungry. There's fluorescent lighting everywhere. People have been walking all day on linoleum floors. The conversation, not super fun all the time. It's actually very doom and gloom. People are frustrated. And Sierra and I are really passionate about making a space that's really different from that, because we really believe in taking care of people and providing for people, creating a space where people just feel like they're at home. And we find that when you kind of provide these spaces that are a little bit more, homey and comfortable, that you have more beautiful conversations that happen, especially in these high stress climate events and, occasions like that.
Walk our listeners through what the Hope House is. Help them envision what it looks like.
Okay, so I've kind of described what the typical climate events look like. But if you were to walk into the Hope House, it's a side event activation. So it's separate from where those leading events happen during Climate Week or the climate conferences. And it's held in a different space. And it looks different every year. During our COP27 activation in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, it was on the coast of the Red Sea. So we had a view of the Red Sea. We had people going snorkeling and scuba diving in between climate events. At COP28, it was held in an arts district in Dubai. So you walked in and there was these beautiful high ceilings where we had beautiful climate art, like saris hanging down. There's always food at the Hope House. And then our most recent activation, which we got to partner with NEI and Nuclear Matters on during Climate Week NYC, this was held in a rooftop penthouse in New York City on top of Pennsylvania Station, and it had a skyline view of the whole city. So it's looked different every year, but there's always food, there's always good vibes, people are having conversations, there's climate events, but they're more creative. Like, you know, you may see a person rapping on stage. You may have cocktails flowing about as you're talking about nuclear energy. So it's just fun and creative.
I have to say, having just been at Hope House in New York for Climate Week, just to sort of add to what Charly said, because I attended Hope House, but attended more of the traditional panel events as well throughout the week. And it really is a very different vibe that I can tell intentionally foster, where it has a bit of a more casual feel to it, which I think helps inspire more connectivity and conversation. I feel like you can get in a little bit deeper. And I'm wondering, you mentioned the food, you mentioned the drinks, and that was great. The snacks were totally wonderful. Always good to have a good snack. But do you plan that in advance? How much do you plan in advance about how you want people to feel when they come in, and how that supports the conversation?
Absolutely. Yeah, we start planning how we want people to feel pretty much from the inception of when we start getting a Hope House together. Sierra and I are really passionate about this human design component with climate because we know that we can really bring out people's best selves when they are taken care of. So we spend a lot of time visioning what that will look like, how we want people to feel during the course of the event, if they're staying with us for multiple events, what that would look like as well. But it's very important at the inception at the Hope House to have this vision of what that looks like.
Do you have a favorite moment from COP or Climate Week, whether it was at Hope House or somewhere else?
Oh my goodness, that's a great question. I think one of the coolest moments that happened this past Climate Week was we did a voting event and happened to have Bill Nye come, who's a definite hero of mine. And I got to escort him outside, and he kind of stepped out onto the rooftop terrace of the Hope House, and there was about 50 to 100 different climate content creators who were all really getting excited about civic engagement and getting really revved up by Bill Nye. And also, we had the lovely Nuclear Matters activation out there as well, who were creating some friendship bracelets and murals and educating people about nuclear energy as well.
I've noticed when I've been talking, when Mary and I have had conversations with, I'm going to generalize a little bit and say Gen Z, but I'm thinking a lot about people under 30, that there is a lot of anxiety around climate, what they describe as climate anxiety. And I know that the topic inspires fear, and for good reason, in a lot of people. And I'm wondering why do you think that is? And on the flip side, what do you think we can do to bring the hope back to people who are scared?
That is a wonderful question and also very hard. I think that climate anxiety just hits people really hard because it takes our future of what we had imagined away. You don't get to imagine yourself doing and exploring all of the wonderful things on planet Earth with climate change. And I think maybe to explain this a little bit better, I'll talk a little bit about my own climate journey.
Please.
But I grew up in a rural part of Colorado. I had fossil fuel companies coming into my classroom when I was in kindergarten talking about how fossil fuels were needed to support and uplift my Christmas traditions and other different, ways to spread misinformation.
Wait, Christmas?
Yeah,
What?
they would come in and they had these papers that you had to draw how fossil fuels or energy helped in your Christmas tradition. And I remember that being very jarring. And I was like, what is going on? But also, most of my peers were not engaged in the climate conversation yet. I mean, in my community, you'd walk around and you'd see the fracking equipment and everything. So it was very important to our economy. And so I was pretty skeptical about climate change, even up until my high school senior year. I was in an AP environmental class, and my teacher told me that climate change is not happening. And if it was not human caused. So there was a lot of climate misinformation. And even though I was really passionate about biodiversity and the environment, climate was really not part of the conversation. So when I went to college and had my environmental 101 course, I was like, whoa, this is a huge problem. And my teacher showed me, images of the Keeling curve and all of these climate data points, but I don't think I really understood until I
started listening to the stories of the people on the front lines. And I think that is what makes me most climate anxious is just, I feel very privileged to be in the global north. And even though we're seeing that even in the US, there's climate catastrophes, I feel sort of insulated where you don't have like as much of a risk as a rural woman farmer that may be living in the global south whose livelihood is connected to the earth. So I started getting really sad about the climate crisis with a lot of my peers, but at that same time, that was when Greta Thunberg was getting really big. And I think that I've really fallen in love with climate optimism through the climate movement and the community that we bring. And I think that's one of the things that I love most about working at the Hope House is because a lot of the work that we do is different. It's either global, it's in our community, but these mass mobilizations like Climate Week NYC offer an opportunity for us to connect and remind each other that we're doing important work, that we have these amazing solutions, and that we can support each other.
Talk more about climate optimism. How do you get more people on board with that? Because I know a lot of people have climate anxiety. So how do you spread climate optimism?
How do you spread climate optimism? I think that one of the most powerful tools in spreading climate optimism is through storytelling. And I just told you that a lot of the stories can be doom and gloom, and we see that most of the news stories about climate change are often doom and gloom. But then there are these amazing stories of solutions that are happening on the ground. And I think that amplifying those positive solutions, those leaders that are making a difference in their communities, that's how you spread climate optimism. It's not saying that everything is perfect, because that definitely turns people off of climate optimism. It's acknowledging that this is a reality, but that we have the power to make a difference. And I think that that's best told through stories.
When you're talking about climate with people, especially people who maybe don't work in the space, but they're interested in engaging and they want to do something to help, you're asking them to digest a lot of really complex topics. You just mentioned some of the data that you were exposed to when you started in college, and you were actually taking a university class to study these. But what strategies have you found to be most effective in breaking these down, either complex or even a topic that has been controversial like nuclear energy, so that people feel empowered to engage rather than avoid them?
Yeah. So I think that is a great part about the storytelling component. I think that you're not going to change anybody's mind by hitting them over the head with some data. And I think that these stories really help become a good vector for that. Something that we learned during our first nuclear event during COP28 in Dubai was that a lot of these lovely climate content creators that were coming to the event felt like they didn't want to speak about nuclear energy because they felt like they would get outcasted. They feel like they were just a little bit nervous. But as we started having conversations with people, I remember we had a roundtable with all these content creators and then some nuclear engineers as well. We just started having more free-flowing conversation with one another. And everybody was like, yeah, I think that nuclear is a great solution, and just was a little bit hesitant to talk about it because, the science is really complex, and figuring out how to break down this nuanced conversation on social media bites can be hard. But I think that making it digestible, making it resonate with your audience as much as you can, whether talking about nuclear is talking about jobs, whether it's talking about clean energy options, whether it's talking about, the fact that it's 24/7 and how it can complement other renewable options. I think that you just try to make it resonate more with your audience.
I was going to ask a little bit more about influencers. So I know you guys have obviously done a lot of work with them. Do you still have good relationships with them? Or do you feel like those relationships are growing and more people are getting into the space?
Yeah, absolutely. Something that we really loved working with NEI and Nuclear Matters on this past fall was creating a nuclear communications toolkit and some conversation starters for influencers and content creators who are involved in the climate space. And we have really enjoyed getting that information out into our community and have had a really positive response through providing those kinds of information because resources like that are not always super accessible. I'm not sure a resource that is like that has ever existed before that creates kind of digestible content like that. But yeah, our relationships with the influencers and content creators are very long term. And I think that that kind of long term rapport is really important when doing this kind of work.
When I was at Climate Week this year, traversing around New York City, mentioned that I went to a lot of events. Hope House by far had engaged the youngest demographic. I think pretty much everywhere else I went, I was among the youngest in the room, and that's not saying a lot at this point. I am very curious about how you have cultivated and engaged the younger demographic to stand up and take action. Obviously, they are there, they are engaged. Hope House was full, but like we need to pull them into all of these other places as well. And so I would love if you could offer some thoughts on that for anyone else who may be listening that wants to pull in a younger demographic to what they're working on too.
This is super important. I think that we can do a much better job of involving youth at climate events. I feel like, yeah, when I step outside of the Hope House and try to go to different climate events, if they're not youth led and youth focused, then I am often the youngest person in the room. And I think that we can really work to change that by involving youth within your planning process as you're planning events for Climate Week, as you're planning events for COP, as you're planning your climate events in general. Have youth be meaningfully involved through the process, through the invitation, through the setup, through your organization of your panel, because by incorporating them in the beginning, you have a very intentional perspective on involving the youth.
To tie together what we were just talking about, I'll back up for a second. We're talking about engaging younger people in climate action, and you were talking about the Nuclear Matters toolkits. Do you find that that younger demographic is really hungry for the educational component before they get involved and start advocating on behalf of something?
Yeah, so I didn't know exactly the best way to re-engage these young people on nuclear communication. We had this event during COP28, and we had interest from these young people that were interested in communicating about nuclear energy, but we weren't sure exactly how to re-engage them. So what we did at Time for Better was send out a poll to our climate community to ask them what they needed. If they wanted to communicate about nuclear energy, what is it that we could provide that would help them in their communication? And the overwhelming response was that there was a lack of educational materials that they could easily access and digest for their community. So when we were thinking about this activation for Climate Week, it was really important to have this toolkit component because I think that the younger generation, we do want our sources cited on figuring out what exactly a certain technology could provide or a certain solution could provide. We need to have the background information. And I feel like people are pretty hungry for that. And of course, there's a argument of time that sometimes people don't have a lot of time or energy to sit through and read a huge educational resource, but having that broken down to be more digestible, I think definitely helps people.
So how do we get young people involved in the first place? I know at Climate Week, I saw some of the cute friendship bracelets you guys made, and there were some cool charms and stuff. So, I mean, how do we get people involved, like just in the door, being interested about nuclear?
I think that getting more people involved, getting your foot in the door, is showing up in more spaces like this, whether that is at Climate Week at the Hope House or at different activations. Showing up is a huge component of making sure that the young people are involved. And maybe it's not at these climate events specifically, but it's also at arts and cultural events. I think that that's a huge component too. And I would say also that, if I can build on that a little bit, I would say that showing up to arts and culture events and places where the young people are is really important, and making sure that you're supporting young people intentionally. So maybe you're providing these opportunities for creative activations, and then also having this long-term support with the youth as well.
So we know that Time for Better emphasizes the importance of collaboration and partnerships in its climate work. So how do you bring diverse voices and perspectives together in a way that builds a sense of community?
So within Time for Better, we support youth, which Jordan got to see at the Hope House, but also we are able to create these environments where we can create a space of really cross-sectoral partnerships. So we're able to create spaces where business leaders can come together, where government leaders can come together, where Indigenous leaders can come together and really create a lot of impacts together. And something that I think really showcased that was with our Later is Too Late campaign that we were able to get off the ground during COP28 last year, where we garnered about 27 million impressions in 48 hours with a social media campaign where we engaged these business leaders, Indigenous leaders, youth leaders.
Tell us more about that.
So at COP28, there was a lot of different climate initiatives that were going on. So we were able to coalesce together and create a campaign that championed more of a unified voice for change. And we focused on making sure that we were addressing the COP presidency to call on a historic and unprecedented COP. And to do this, we garnered a swell of business leaders, Indigenous leaders, youth leaders to push this letter that addressed him, which pretty much told him that later is too late, that we need action now. And that phrase, later is too late, was proven by some of our colleagues over at Potential Energy and Yale Climate Change Communication as one of the most powerful phrases. So we really championed that, created a hashtag, and then worked with a lot of digital content creators and really influential climate figures like Jane Fonda, Mark Ruffalo to push out this later is too late messaging. And yeah, in the end, we were able to garner 27 million impressions in about 48 hours.
That's amazing.
That's incredible. And shout out to season 1 guest, John Marshall from Potential Energy. So refer back to that one if you want to hear more about the research that goes into these campaigns.
Do you have any big plans for COP this year?
So right now, we are working alongside our partners at Global Optimism, Earthrise, and our other coalition members to garner a lot of support for the Biodiversity COP. These Biodiversity COPs are not as well known as the Climate COP, but it's currently going on right now in Cali, in Colombia, and they are working on uplifting nature-based, Indigenous-led solutions and really championing that initiative during COP16, leading up to the COP next year, which will be COP30. We were going to go to COP29, but have decided against it just to focus our initiatives more locally, but we will be supporting digital advocacy efforts during COP29 this year.
I'm curious, from your perspective, you grew up with the fossil fuel industry near you promoting their work. What was your initial impression of nuclear? Were you always in favor of it? Did you have a negative impression of it? What was your personal journey there?
Yes. So I feel like I did not hear much about nuclear energy growing up, but I didn't really think about nuclear energy as a part of the climate solution pie. Even in college, I feel like nuclear energy was not talked about as much as a part of our energy profile, which I think is very interesting. And I feel like now nuclear energy is having an increasing moment for being a climate solution, and all these wonderful nuclear partners like NEI and Constellation are really working on showcasing how big of a solution that nuclear energy can be to the climate crisis. So I think that my foray into the nuclear energy industry was a little bit different, but I'm really happy to have learned through these different experiences.
So, for our listeners who might be hesitant to engage in climate action or feel unsure about nuclear, what would you say to encourage them to get involved?
I would say to get involved with nuclear energy is to come with an open mind. I think that I have a lot of experience with this, with learning about the climate crisis, and that it's hard to learn about something when you have these beliefs that have kind of been baked through your community, or you see things on media that maybe kind of influence your belief system. But I would advocate for young people to be brave and to take some time to really educate yourself on a subject, and to talk about it with people, to talk about it with your friends, to talk about it with your community, because people in your community might know of somebody that has a job in nuclear energy, or they might know of somebody whose life is affected by nuclear energy. I think the more that we can have these open-ended, nuanced conversations, which of course is sometimes hard to have on social media, it's much easier to have that kind of conversation in person. The more that we can have these conversations, the better it can be. So have a conversation with somebody about nuclear energy is something I would say. And then also to follow along with these really great nuclear leaders. NEI has so many great resources. Nuclear Matters has so many great resources to get the conversation started. And if you are interested in following along with people that do communicate about nuclear energy, to check out some of these wonderful digital content creators like Grace Stinky, and also Isodope, Isabel Bomaki, to learn more about nuclear energy through them, because they make it very accessible and fun to learn about.
So you have such a diverse background in climate action and communications, but I want to ask about the documentary that you produced. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about it and how you were involved with it and what drew you to it.
Yes, thank you so much for asking that question. So I have been making films since I was about 10 years old. My dad was a big into the home videos. So when I was 10, he gave me like millions of megabytes of different, home videos to go through. And he sat me down in front of the computer, and that was my chore, was to go through and relabel all of the home videos and to edit them into little shorts. So, we're going to the mountains to go Christmas tree hunting. Then we're going to make a video about it. So I got really good at video editing, got trained on Adobe Premiere Pro, which was really great lesson to learn. And then in college, I was a part of a student-led documentary team called Extending the Link. I started out as a marketer and made my way up from that to be the director of the documentary team. And we got to produce films in Germany and Peru, and also locally as well. So I became very intimate with the idea that what you could make a film about could create change, because our films were about creating stories on undertold social justice issues. And it was only natural for me to match that with my passion for the environment. So when I started my degree at the Yale School of Environment, I knew that I wanted to create a documentary as part of my master's research. I'm very passionate about writing, but I did not want to write a thesis because I wanted something that I could go back to my hometown community and show them and say, this is why climate change is important. And I wanted something that was very personal in that way. So I decided to make a documentary about seeds. I notoriously have a very bad green thumb. I'm not able to grow much, but I wanted to make it about seeds because I had recently met a seed saver in Denmark the summer before while I was getting my dual citizenship there. And I learned that seed saving and seed exchange is illegal in Denmark, or was illegal for 47 years. And I thought that was really weird. And so I started learning more about seeds and how seeds are a solution to climate change, how more diverse fields can be more adaptive and resilient to climate change. And so I produced a documentary where I interviewed seed savers in Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. And I got to do some pretty insane things like walk 2.5 hours to a random farm in Denmark, or I got to visit the Svalbard Global Sea Fault, and I had a bunch of guards that had guns on them because we were in a polar bear restricted area. So that was very fun to produce. And I've gone on to show that film in Colorado, in my hometown. I've gone to show it in the middle of Iowa, literally in the middle of all of the cornfields, and talk to people in the heartland of the US about climate change. And tomorrow I leave for Vardo, Norway, which is a small fishing village. It's the most northwest village in Norway. I'm going to go screen it up there. So it's taken me some diverse places, and I feel like I can really live my values of the impact of storytelling to inspire climate action when I get to show it to people as well.
That's so cool. If our listeners want to watch, is there a place they can find it?
Yes, it's on YouTube, and I will send you the link.
Awesome.
Do you have any other films in progress or ideas?
That's a good question. Well, I have been very inspired by all of the nuclear conversations that we've been having. So I don't know, maybe a nuclear conversation. I just think that there is so much that you can do with films and storytelling. And I think as a young person, as a young female filmmaker, that perspective is very important as well, because there aren't many films that are made by young women filmmakers, and making sure that you have stories from that perspective are really important. So maybe something on nuclear. I've been toying with the idea of going back to Denmark and telling the story of seaweed. There's a small village that I got to visit that has a seaweed and mussels beer festival every summer, which sounds really cool, and would love to document that. But anything that's focused on climate solutions would be my preference.
That's awesome. I can't wait to see more of your films. I'm going to watch the seed one too. That's awesome.
Amazing.
And this is a perfect segue actually to a question we've been asking all of our guests this season. We're trying to get show recommendations. So what's the last show you binge watched?
Oh, I wish I could say something that's more climate conscious, but I've been binge watching Modern Family with my partner, which has been really fun. And I feel like I did try to watch some things that were more climate focused, like the Extrapolations Apple TV series, which I highly recommend if you're looking for something climate storytelling-esque. But sometimes I just want to turn my brain off, and I think that that's self-care too. So Modern Family has been what I've been binge watching.
That's exactly what we're looking for here. Does not have to be climate. related whatsoever. Just need to know what to tune into next. Also, just to turn the brain off for a little while.
Yep. Well, have a great trip. I can't wait to hear about your next documentary. It's really cool.
Thank you. I'm super excited. It's like a multi-day trip to get up there, but I will definitely be sending you guys some photos of what it looks like and hope to see the Northern Lights.
They're so amazing. That's so cool.
How do you get there? Like you're flying and then do you fly more or you have to drive or?
Yes. So I am flying to Iceland and then I fly into Oslo and I have a 20-hour layover there. And then I'm flying from Oslo to Kirkenes, which is like a very small town up north. And then I'm driving to Vardø, which is like a 3.5-hour drive. And I'm sure that the plane journey could have been less complicated, but I actually bought tickets for it last week because I wasn't sure I was going to be able to go because it's quite expensive to get there. And then 2 amazing organizations, Scandinavian Seminar and then Wings. I asked them if they had funding and they were able to provide funding for me to go, which I think is, just huge for young people to make sure that they're able to do these opportunities and get the opportunity to show their work or go experience events or go learn something, which I think is a huge component of involving youth.
So is this a film festival?
Yes, it's a film festival called Crossings. It's a very niche film festival.
Yeah, very cool. I'll have to check it out. Awesome. Well, Charly, anything that we missed that we should chat about?
I think that is perfect. Yeah.
Cool. That is so cool that she's a filmmaker. Do we need to become filmmakers, Jordan?
I don't know. It made me think I need to put my kids to work, though, because she's talking about editing videos for her dad when she was like 10. And once again, I'm over here like, well, they're just wasting time on phone apps. And I could be putting them to work.
Yeah.
And teaching them valuable life skills.
Yeah, exactly. That is so cool. I mean, the film festivals she shows at and the topic of her documentary, I am definitely going to go check it out.
I am definitely jealous of both Charly and Sierra because every time we've done a call with them, they're coming in from some incredible location all over the world. My first priority is like, where are you talking to us from today? She's talking about a multi-day journey to get there, but what an amazing opportunity.
I know. It's so cool. I didn't know they had film festivals in that part of the world, but I bet there's a lot of cool climate related stuff just because of the location.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're interested in learning more about Time for Better, you can visit their website at timeforbetter.org. We'll also link that and Charly's documentary in our show notes.
Yeah, and if you enjoyed the show, we'd love to hear from you. Support the podcast by subscribing on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And don't forget to leave a comment and let us know your thoughts on this episode. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.